Wow, that was something. K-Dog's movie review. Civil War is directed by Alex Garland and stars Kirsten Dunst, Wagner Moura, and Kaylee Spaney. A journey across a dystopian future America, following a team of military-embedded journalists as they race against time to reach D.C. before rebel factions descend upon the White House. When the images and the trailer for this movie originally dropped, I was kind of not really looking forward to it. I liked Ex Machina a lot, and I loved Annihilation. It's one of my favorite movies. I also really like the movie Men that he did a couple of years ago. So I really wanted Alex Garland to stay within this sci-fi weird realm that he had been sticking to for the past 10 years or so. And so when I originally saw the trailer and stills for this movie, I thought, another war film, really? So while I had decent expectations for this movie being an Alex Garland film, I wasn't really looking forward to the material at all. But holy shit, I fucking loved this movie. Everything about the way in which this movie is made is top notch. I don't know the budget behind this movie. I think it was somewhere around $50 million or so, one of A24's highest budgeted movies. But holy shit, everything looks so good. The cinematography is on point. The acting is on point. Kirsten Dunst kills this role. All of the supporting cast, too, they nail it. The sound design is fucking amazing. Probably the best part of this movie. There isn't too much of a score, but that's fine because the sound design is there. It's almost filmed like a documentary because we're following a group of journalists. And the way in which certain scenes are filmed are so intimate. The story is engaging. The world feels gross but real. Interactions feel realistic. The tension is so high throughout the entirety of this movie. There were only one or two moments where my heart levels had dropped back down to normal because everything is so fucking tense until the very end. I'm going to say this right off the bat. Seeing this movie in theaters is an absolute must. If you don't have some crazy sound system at home, please go watch this in a movie theater. The gunshots sound so real. The screams sound so raw. The images are horrific. The way the camera moves through these battle scenes feels so authentic. The shutter sounds from the cameras, because these are photojournalists that we're following. The sounds of the car, tiny conversations happening in the background, the birds and insects buzzing in the air in these vast wastelands that they are crossing. The juxtaposition of color between this gross gray dystopian war and the beautiful forests and fields and natural scenery that exist within and outside of this war is so great. The character arcs are there, the symbolism for the ways in which the movie is going. As we were walking out of the theater, I heard someone behind me say, "Oh, I really wish they dived more into what the actual conflict was." It's not about the conflict. It's about the journalists and their journey and why they are there and what they are trying to achieve and the arcs that they go through during this horrific road trip, basically. And my God, the horrors of war are really shown here, and the toll and the effect it can have on people, especially journalists who are meant to get up and close and personal and document all of these things. It's done in such a beautifully crafted way. I loved this movie. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. Kirsten Dunst's character, who is basically one of our two protagonists, she is the veteran journalist who took the perfect shot 20 years prior. So she has been doing this for a long time, going into those war zones and getting those perfect camera shots. And she fucking nails this role. You can tell from the very beginning that she has been in this shit for a long time. There are so many moments in this movie where we are just lingering on her face, and we can really tell that she has seen some shit. She has had it with this war and has basically become numb to it all. On the opposite end of things, character-wise, is Kaylee Spaney's character, who plays the young and up-and-coming journalist who wants to be like Kirsten Dunst's character and get out into those horrific scenes to really show people what is happening during this war. So basically, from the beginning, she is acting like the audience for the movie. We are seeing a lot of this movie through her eyes, her introduction to this horrific war. No spoilers, but her arc as well is carried out wonderfully. The two other characters that join them that we're following as well, played by Wagner Moura and Stephen McKinley Henderson, are also fantastic. The character interactions feel authentic. They laugh and they make fun of each other, but you can tell there's love behind it. They're not afraid to criticize one another when they feel that they're wrong. You feel the authenticity of them as journalists. All of these characters are likable in their own way. They're different, but they're likable. And when they're together, you feel the love between them. You feel the connection that they share for wanting to be out there documenting these horrific moments and this war and what's really happening. Their reasons for doing it are different, but they're all together working for the same goal. I've heard some criticisms about this movie that were pretty much a road trip from horrific scene, car, but I didn't really care. I love just watching these characters interact with one another during these slow, somber scenes or these over-the-top horrific ones. The interactions just felt real, and it made me care about their journey. There are so many moments in this movie where, a character is framed perfectly centered and they're just having a normal discussion. And usually in those moments, especially during war movies, it kind of leads to them being shot out of nowhere and meant as a surprise to the audience. So many moments throughout this movie where I'm like, oh God, please don't die. Please don't die. Please don't get shot right now, because I cared so much. I found myself on just gripping my seat, waiting for a gunshot to go off at some point. Also, by the way, during these battle scenes where, soldiers are shooting one another, our photojournalists are there shooting as well with their cameras, acting like they're guns, trying to get the perfect shot, going in and out of cover, clicking with their cameras. With regards to why they're doing what they're doing, for some characters, it's shown in the very beginning. For other characters, we learn more about it as time goes on. But regardless, by the end of the movie, we understand why they're all doing what they're doing, putting themselves in these horrific moments. Which, by the way, I think this is where a lot of the Garland stuff comes in. It gets pretty horrific at times. This movie has a lot of tension. It's not afraid to show the deep horrors of war. The sequence that a lot of people have been talking about online with Jesse Plemons is so fucking good. There is so much tension, and what it leads to, it's beautifully horrible. Because on one end, I found myself saying, my God, that's such a good shot. But then you think about what you're looking at and you're like, oh my God. The story, like I said, it can be seen as relatively simple. Characters have to get from point A to point B, and along that way, they encounter different war scenarios and interact with different people that are affected by this war. But honestly, the characters are so great, and the way in which it's filmed is so well done that I didn't really care. I cared about our characters and their journey. It's okay if the journey is relatively simple. That's fine. I already praised the sound design, but I got to talk about it again. It is so good. The gunshots feel so real in a movie theater, and I praised this in my first Omen movie review. I love when a movie has the confidence to go silent and just let the audience bask in what is happening. We don't need overarching score to tell us how to feel. Don't get me wrong, in some scenarios, score can be amazing. It can really drive a scene. But being that we're placed in this war-torn America, we don't really need the score to tell us how to feel, because we are shown with amazing visuals, great acting, and fucking awesome sound design. Like I said before, the world here too feels lived in and real. We are thrown into the United States undergoing a civil war. What's great about this movie, and has already been talked about a lot in other reviews, is that this movie doesn't necessarily pick sides. Both sides are shown in this movie doing horrible things. You're not really meant to root for one side versus another. Not to get into spoilers, but you could argue maybe one side versus the other, but that's not really what this movie is about. We don't dive into why the war is happening. We get little hints here and there about what has occurred, and what it's building to, but we don't really need that because that's not what the movie is about. Again, it's about these journalists and why they are here and the things that they encounter. We're seeing both the growth and regression of these photojournalists as they make it across this war-torn America. Like I said earlier with the nature as well, it's so great with this movie being placed in the United States as well because the US is a pretty big country. There is a lot of open space. And there are many moments where our characters are just driving through these vast areas where no humans are. And it's great to look at the beauty of the nature that exists within this horrible war. There are moments in this movie where we stop and we sit and we realize that life is still going on within this war-torn America, and that it's possible to find beautiful imagery within these really sad moments. One scene in particular with the forest fire is amazing. From one perspective, it can look terribly sad, but from the other, it looks absolutely beautiful and can represent rebirth and growth. Even the costumes that our characters wear throughout the movie are very symbolic of how they are feeling or how they are growing or regressing as people. I honestly don't know if there's anything that I didn't like about this movie. There's always something small that I can nitpick, but even things I was going to mention in a spoiler section, I've thought more about and I think, wait a minute, that's kind of justified the reason it's there. I think Garland knocked it out of the park with this one. I definitely can see how this wouldn't appeal to certain people because, they don't really like war films. 10, 15 years ago, I might have said, well, I wish they dived more into why the conflict is happening. But again, that's not what it's about. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would have said, I really wish they showed more battle footage. We get them, and they're done really fucking well. It looks pretty fucking cool. But again, that's not really what the movie's about. So I could see why the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes might be lower for this movie, but I don't know. I loved it. Like I said earlier, I judged the book by its cover before seeing it. I thought this was just going to be another typical war movie that was going to take some political stances that are very on the nose, but this didn't. This went in a completely different direction than I thought it was going to, and it's probably going to end up being one of my favorite movies of this year. I would absolutely, without a doubt, recommend seeing this movie. And if you can't afford it, if it's available, seeing it in the movie theater, because the sound design alone is worth the price of admission. I will say, though, this is a movie with a lot of tension and a lot of horrific imagery, and it's overall kind of a downer. If you don't think you'd vibe with that kind of movie, then you're probably not going to want to see this, especially since it's rated R. They do not shy away from some pretty bad stuff. The only thing I wanted to quickly discuss in the spoiler section was how much I loved the arcs of our characters. I just loved the switch between Lee's and Jesse's character arcs. Lee, as we learned from the beginning, is a seasoned photographer. She's been in this shit for a while. She's sort of become numb to it. She got into this because she wanted to show the world the horrors of war. And Jesse kind of feels the same way, but starts out very young and very naive to a lot of it. But I love that over time, as the tension and the action ramps up, Jesse's character starts to have a love for the adrenaline. She gets that adrenaline rush and is fueled by it. That's basically why Joel's character is doing what he's doing. He's assisting with driving and such, but he's really into the adrenaline of it all. The scene that I originally did not like as much was when two cars are driving side by side and the characters decide to have a little fun and jump between the cars. Jesse's character does it. And at first I was like, why would she do that? That seems kind of weird. And it seems just like a way to put our character into a different car and then get placed in a different scenario. But thinking back on it, it's because of that adrenaline. She's fueled by it. She later says, after the horrific scene with Jesse Plemons where she almost got shot, she says, I've never felt more scared but more alive at the same time. And I think that's where that switch in Kirsten Dunst's character happens, because after that, they're thrown into DC and the war zone, and Kirsten Dunst is just scared out of her mind. She's finally regained that humanity that she lost after years and years of doing this job, where she became scared for her life. And then she finally, instead of trying to get the perfect shot, she sacrifices herself for Jesse, who has now become this adrenaline junkie who is obsessed with getting the perfect shot, where she didn't really think about her own safety or the safety of others around her. We also see it in Lee's character, where these snipers are trying to get them and they're pinned down behind a car. Jesse and Joel are focused on the action, while Lee's character is focused on the beauty of the flowers that are right in front of her. She doesn't even have her camera out. She's just so focused on this beauty within this horrific scenario. And so while it may seem relatively simple and on the nose, I thought it was just so well done, that switch between our two characters. Please let me know what you guys thought of this movie in the comments below. What's your favorite Alex Garland movie? Mine is, I don't know. It's kind of between this and Annihilation. I might like Annihilation more just because it's more sci-fi-y and that's more my vibe, but this movie is pretty fucking good. Till next time.